RWBY Volume 2 was the most disappointing thing since my son. I mean, how much more could you possibly fuck up? No, I'm not gonna do that again. Mostly because it's hell on my voice, but also because the reason I did it in the first place was to create a thematic bridge between my review and the thing I was reviewing. Since RWBY was just a shallow recreation of something your mom thinks anime is, I decided the only appropriate way to cover it would be to rip off one of the most iconic reviews ever. RWBY's connection to anime is cursory at best and condescending at worst. It came across like someone blasted through a bunch of anime in a row, or had them on in the background for a couple weeks while they did other things, and then decided it would be a good idea to write down whatever stuck out in their mind the most. And that's exactly what happened, by Monty's own admission.
I gave him anime homework.
RWBY really is the Star Wars prequels of anime, soulless schlock thrown together by someone who doesn't understand the appeal of the original work. The original work in this case being an entire medium worth of work. RWBY treats anime like a genre, like Western, noir, or sci-fi, when it's not. Being asked to make an anime is more like being asked to make a movie, or make a video game, than to make a Western or a shooter. This time around I feel like I could just copy and paste Mr. Plinkett's Attack of the Clones review and it would paint a pretty accurate picture of why Volume 2 of RWBY is terrible.
Number 1. Everything.
I mean, provided I change all the proper nouns around anyway. The question on everyone's mind, however, is, was RWBY Volume 2 an improvement over Volume 1? Or at least I hope that's the question on everyone's mind, or else I'm gonna feel silly. Anyway, the answer is no, it's worse in almost every way. Despite all the things that sucked about Volume 1, it had 3 extremely good scenes that elevated it above some other things that sucked even more, and one of those scenes I referred to as one of the most effective scenes I've ever seen, and I still stand by that, even with its utter lack of relevance to the canon of the series. Weiss's redemption was a masterfully executed plot point. A masterfully executed thing that happened that turned out to be totally irrelevant in retrospect.
Would you like me to stop referring to the trash can as a trash can?
In the first episode, Torchwick's introduction and RWBY's interrogation were also both extremely well done scenes in their own right. Volume 2 had an excellent scene, but it's a comic relief moment. And it's only the best part of the volume because it's the only scene that had what I assume was supposed to be the intended effect on me as a member of the audience. I laughed at it. It was basically a perfect storm of stuff that didn't suck playing out in front of me. Everything that happened seemed appropriate based on what little we know about Lai and what we actually know about Jean, and things that were set up earlier in the series, dramatic irony, situational irony, the comedic timing, the visual humor, the fact that Nora still exists. Volume 2 has some other good visual comedies, a fight sequence that's on par with something we'd expect from Monty Oum, and a pretty awesome moment where RWBY and Ozpin hold up the walls at a school dance, wherein they go out of their way to humanize the only character who's been properly set up by the series so far. Redundancy aside, it's still a very nice scene. And working our way down the list of impressively constructed scenes, we get to the beginning of the volume in this scene where Tweedle Green and Tweedle Gray go to kill Tweedle Beard. It's a fine scene in its own right, but in context... there's this thing called context some writers use to tell a cohesive story wherein scenes flow together in a way that makes some sort of narrative sense. Oh, okay, are we clear on that? This scene is well constructed as it is, but it serves as both the payoff to a plot point that was never set up, and as the setup to 2 plot points that were never paid off or mentioned again. So while this scene had tension, pacing, atmosphere, murder, and cleavage in it, it was unabashedly filler. But since context is the only thing I can in good conscience hold against this scene, I prefer to just lower my opinion of the rest of the volume, which is already beyond the healing power of any intensity of drinking game. Here's one. Take a shot every time one line contradicts another. The tragic thing is that this volume starts off seeming not so bad. The first thing you notice is all the technical improvements. Well, actually, the first thing everyone with a brain will notice is that the opening scene is copied directly from Volume 1, with this exact same dust shop owner getting robbed a second time, right after his grand reopening to add insult to injury. This information seems to imply that this guy's off-camera life is immensely more interesting than the off-camera life of our protagonists, or even their on-camera life, because by some cruel twist of fate, his shop closed down sometime within the entire semester that got skipped in between volumes.
Our second semester is going to be great.
Because by my keen observational skills, I can tell that his net loss from the robbery in episode 1 was 1 red dust crystal and a broken window. So either something interesting happened to his shop during the hiatus, or window repairmen in Vale are more evil than a dozen Roman Torchwicks. And then I guess the second thing you might notice about this scene is how stupid the writing is. I swear, eventually you'll notice those technical improvements I was talking about, but the writing is just so frustrating. So the plan is for these guys to kill this guy dead. While they're on their way to carry out this contract killing, they ask for directions and steal this guy's wallet. And then they just leave his wallet on the ground right around the corner from his shop. Now, granted that they already went through the trouble of portraying the cops in Vale as so incompetent they could easily get a job writing RWBY, even though, ironically, I would much rather see Bernie Angel writing this show. Let's take a look at the evidence they left behind. First of all, he saw her face. Second of all, she showed him the location of the murder they were going to commit, so he already has those two things connected in his mind. Third of all, she left fingerprints at the scene of the crime. Fourth, this guy will probably contact the police and tell them that some half-naked teenager took his wallet and is probably on her way to Tuckson's book trade right fucking now. And even if they missed her, they would still find the body, and on their way back to From Dusk Till Dawn, they would see the wallet with the fingerprints on it. So a robbery/murder tied together with a dead White Fang defector and a dust shop that was robbed by the known criminal kingpin Roman Torchwick would throw up red flags to even the most retarded writers. I mean cops. Dumb cops. But is there more? Of course there is. Should we talk about the voice acting? Specifically the delivery of this line?
Mercury, I will seriously pay you to shut up.
And how it feels like the voice direction was non-existent at best?
You want me to put on headphones? Okay. Why are you in the fucking sound booth?
So the way the emphasis was placed on the words in this line make it seem like she really wants this guy to be quiet.
Mercury, I will seriously pay you to shut up. But it could be yours for 5 minutes of silence.
See how it sounds like she's willing to pay him to be quiet, and not even for very long? And then here in the very next scene, they're chatting away like she didn't just offer him a handful of cash to shut his mouth.
So how much farther?
A few blocks.
Doesn't seem like she minds talking with him.
This place is so dull.
Meh, I kinda like it.
Seems to me like she should have read that line in a way that sounded more like fuck you than shut up. Maybe it's the facial expression, or that these two scenes happen so close together. If she wanted silence, why wouldn't she just not engage? It plays into a fairly wide problem with the show. The characters don't really need to be special or be consistently characterized. These two are obviously familiar enough for Mercury to imagine some sort of attraction,
You want me.
but not familiar enough for Emerald to know that Mercury would jump on a comment like this?
Nice, dopey people who are easy to pickpocket.
That's every city.
Ooh, Emerald! Master Thief!
I mean, she seems pissed, but she obviously brought it upon herself.
That's every city.
I've known Mercury for all of 35 seconds, and even I knew he wouldn't let a comment like that go. I don't know how far back these two go, but it must have been at least a day, because...
You're no fun today.
But wait, what's that? Look, it's a person! Yes, that's right, they got rid of all those shadow people. Which is odd to me, because it changes the visual style of the show.
It was a genuine style choice. The guys wanted to only deal with textured characters.
I mean, face it, a scene like this wouldn't have worked without shadow people, but a scene like this wouldn't work with shadow people. So I suppose it's a wash. It looks better in the context of the scenes it looks better in. And the lighting. Oh, the lighting. Yes, that's right, shit has shadows now. And there's bloom and glow and reflections and all that other stuff that Volume 1 was so sorely lacking. And it looks quite amazing. And now we get to one of those legitimately good scenes that I was talking about earlier, provided you let it get away with some gross negligence. Let's look at the first thing this scene does wrong. It makes Blake look like an idiot. So this guy gets killed for leaving the White Fang, but Blake doesn't. Which raises even more confusion about why she's even wearing the disguise at all.
I'd rather avoid any unnecessary attention.
So she went from fighting for faunus rights to pretending to be human to make life easier on herself? Yeah, that's kind of exactly the opposite of the morals you'd been raised to uphold. But now they set a precedent for White Fang defectors being executed, so why isn't Blake in any danger? You might not believe this, but that never comes up in the series. Not even once. Even though the first half of the volume revolves around her being a tightly wound ball of stress for what turns out to be not a very good reason at all. Plenty of people witnessed her admit that she's a White Fang defector, including the guy who was ordered to carry out the hit on this White Fang defector.
I had that under control.
Wouldn't it make more sense to tie her stress into an established precedent set by the volume opener that directly correlates to her situation, instead of the possibility of losing a fight to a guy whose ass she kicked before her first semester of combat school? So now let's look at the first thing the scene does right, the pacing. the acting, the overall aesthetic design. Every angle, every lighting trick, every facial expression, every line of dialogue build up an atmosphere of tension and fear that would feel right at home in any Guy Ritchie movie. Almost immediately you can tell something's amiss by the way they walk into the shop. It's quiet and the lighting is dark and ominous. And Emerald ringing this bell does one very important thing to the audience expectations. It shatters them. Right now we think Emerald is a thief, based on how she was set up as a thief by the previous scene. Twice.
Ooh, Emerald, Master Thief! Please don't take my money.
But why would she catch the owner's attention if she was planning to rob the place? Tuxton's fear and recovery is probably the most solidly delivered line in the whole series.
How may I help you?
Mercury's increasingly intimidating book slamming make the audience think they're watching a show with some degree of artistic vision.
Oh.
And Emerald slowly building small talk about books juxtaposes against the fear and tension in Tuxton so nicely that you might even forget that the dust shop owner is probably just now realizing that his wallet is missing and telling the police that some girl who asked directions to Tuxton's book trade must have stolen it, and is probably there right now. Yeah, this show really isn't written for people who like to watch the shows that they're watching.
What about Third Crusade?
The Third Crusade never comes up again. And I can forgive that, because it only serves to be the tipping point in the tension of the scene by putting Tuxton on the defensive. But I can only imagine that this scene would be much less intimidating if he actually had a copy of that book. The switch that controls the opacity of the windows is so cool. What was I talking about? Oh right, so were they actually interested in a copy of that book? Oh, I guess not. So a character actually died, and right at the beginning of the volume. Are they trying to set a precedent for a show that has a little more bite to its action scenes in the second volume? Sort of? But the use of death and violence in later scenes never work quite as well as they do right here. I already said everything important about this scene in my standalone review of episode 1, so you can watch that if you haven't. Or watch it again. Oh, and aluminum isn't magnetic, I just thought I'd point that out.
They're supposed to be the defenders of the world.
And yet, I don't buy that for a second. What about all these assholes who ran away from a food fight screaming like children?
They're still children.
Nobody asked you. Shouldn't Glinda be proud as fuck at the only 8 people who weren't afraid of getting hit by a watermelon? What is Beacon? And what is a huntsman?
Do you honestly believe your children can win a war?
Why do they have to? Can't you use some of the huntsmen who graduated last year? Did Beacon only open 2 years ago? Do they only train huntsmen in 20-year cycles? I mean, we see Glinda show up to stop Torchwick in episode 1. Why is that? Did she only show up because the crime happened before the school year started? I mean, no huntsmen respond to any break-ins during the school year.
Look around, kid. I've got this town running scared.
Yeah, so scared one of the dust shop owners that you robbed drives his own transport truck around in broad daylight with no additional security. Are they all too busy teaching? Out of a freshman class of that size, is it really reasonable to expect us to believe that after graduation none of them are posted inside Vale? Or that the ones who were unable to stop Torchwick for all that time? What's the mortality rate of huntsmen? Where do they go? What do they do?
That showed them, huh?
Do they all just get huntsman training and then get private jobs because they pay better? Did Torchwick go to combat school when he was a kid? What about Cinder? Or this guy? RWBY doesn't take place in a universe that seems to follow its own rules. No thought went into the construction of Remnant. We're supposed to take everything the writers tell us to take for granted, even though we're perpetually shown evidence to the contrary. And even despite this glut of huntsmen who never seem to do anything, you've got this guy, Ironwood von Penestick, selling his robot armies to what seem like private citizens.
These mechanized battleships will be seen defending the borders of our kingdom within the year.
I mean, is he allowed to make claims like that in a kingdom that he isn't even a citizen of? Was this sloppy writing or foreshadowing for something that's gonna happen later on? So I'm gonna bring something up, but only in the context of how it affects my perception of certain scenes. Where are all the ugly women? I mean, having a bunch of super hot teenagers running around in miniskirts or less is one thing, but it becomes a problem when the adult characters become indistinguishable from the kids. I mean, Ruby is 15, and Yang is 17, even though apparently she's a regular patron at a nightclub. And then you have Cinder, who I think is supposed to be an adult, but can pass for a teenager so easily.
Ooh, you're here for the festival.
And Glinda, who, to be fair, looks like the oldest female character in the show, but that's only because she's gigantic. Not that you'd be able to tell by the way she's framed in most shots. But even with that being said, she doesn't look a day over 25. So the implication that she's been
together
with this guy who doesn't look a day over 50 is sort of telling about how student-teacher relations are looked upon in Remnant. I ship it. So all the women are conventionally attractive. Now look at the men.
Now back to me. Now back at your man.
Sure, you've got some hot guys, but there's at least a much wider variety of guys who would be considered attractive by people who are into that whole having a Y chromosome thing. And on the other hand, you even have guys who aren't conventionally attractive. Like the lanky, disheveled types, guys with mohawks, fat guys, and old guys. So is it too much to ask for a woman who looks like she wouldn't get carded at the liquor store? But only because it's hurting my suspension of disbelief. In this scene, Weiss reveals her complete and utter lack of leadership qualities by doing exactly what her enemy tells her to do.
Your armies have been destroyed.
Even though in the last volume, she was the one throwing a hissy fit about not being the leader of Team RWBY.
Not a team led by you. I've studied and trained.
Why build up a character whose ambitions outstrip their abilities and give that character the only successful arc in the show, and then drop that entire aspect of her character for a joke? Character growth is supposed to be the growth of a character, not diminishing them to the least amount of dimensions possible.
You wanted to set up these seemingly one-dimensional characters.
Or is this emblematic of a deeper problem with the universe? Does Beacon offer no path for advancement? So they randomly assign teams, pick a leader based off of one solitary fight.
Run and live.
And that's it. That's your lot in life. If you don't like it, get fucked. But don't worry, as a huntsman of Vale, your life expectancy is like 5 minutes after graduation, unless you can land a teaching job. But Ooblik and Port have tenure, so good luck with that. Imagine the potential if that whole arc wasn't bold-facedly shoehorned in there to add some false drama to the series, only to be swept under the rug with no consequences. What if Weiss was serious about wanting to be a leader? What if she worked really hard and eventually rose up to be the leader of the Khaki Triplets? But no. Fuck character arcs based on internal motivations. We're just gonna play up her stupidity for laughs.
You attacked your own naval fleet 2 turns ago.
I mean, the last time around you played up her stupidity for drama. So I guess by doing exactly the opposite of that, you would at least prove that you don't fit the dictionary definition of insanity. So maybe I'm supposed to give you some credit for that. But I could equally as easily take away that credit by pointing out how inconsistent it is for Weiss to spend Volume 1 chastising RWBY for being childish.
You acted like a child!
And then pulling that same kind of shenanigans herself in this volume.
I guess she really made our plans fall apart.
I guess another thing I'm supposed to give you credit for is having Pura do this, because most of us still haven't gotten over the traumatic experience of watching the last time a character walked towards the screen with their feet in frame. Anyway, the point of this whole scene was to deliver exposition about the kingdoms, and it did a bang-up job, but I already covered that scene in depth in a previous video, so you can go watch that here. And the point of this next scene is to get everyone who programmed the lighting engine laid. I mean, the lighting in this scene is just so pretty that I don't even know what to say about the words in it.
I want people to see me for who I am.
Lately you've been quiet, antisocial, and moody.
And not to mention an indecisive, self-defaming coward. Blake wants to be seen as human, but Beacon only appears to have 1 or 2 other Fauna students. I mean, what was she thinking in this scene? Glad it's not me. And you've run yourself ragged over literally nothing. Yeah, who you are isn't all she's cracked up to be.
Between the police and the huntsman, I'm sure they could handle it.
Fuck you, Yang. So that's why they call this show a comedy. In episode 1, one measly huntsman shows up and makes Torchwick crap his pants. And then in episode 16, 2 first-year students at a huntsman academy kick his ass and a robot cuts one of his airships in half. And yeah, she is a robot. It was confirmed in this volume.
I'm the world's first synthetic person capable of generating an aura.
As if her spine being several floating swords wasn't enough of a tip-off for you. And yet, all the huntsmen in Vale couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Or however the nursery rhyme criminal parents of Remnant tell their children goes. And this is the scene that marks the beginning of Blake's arc. And in the first half of this volume, you can almost be forgiven for thinking that RWBY is starting to pull itself out of the nosedive it's been in since the Black trailer. Because even though they haven't given us a plot yet, at least they're giving us a character arc related to the plot, so we can pay attention to that in the meantime. And they spend a solid 4 episodes actively pursuing Torchwick on Blake's request. After changing outfits, of course. At least they're an improvement over the uniforms, and Blake is still the only one wearing pants. And whoa, inner thigh. Not that I'm complaining or anything, but when you specifically promise not to do something and then turn around and do it in almost every episode, it kinda makes you come off like a scumbag. Sun continues to be the best character.
That's dumb. You should always get friends involved.
And some more of that awesome visual humor I was talking about earlier happens. And it gives Weiss one of the most humanizing moments she's had since Volume 1. Yeah, girl, you get that D. You get it. Without this scene, Weiss's whole relationship with Neptune would seem painfully contrived, because Jean pulled the exact same crap Neptune did the first time he flirted with Weiss.
Snow Angel.
And without a scene like this, the only reason Neptune was successful would be to promote the love triangle bullshit that takes up so much of the show.
Snow Angel.
I'm Weiss.
Are you kidding me?
Since this scene does exist, it gives Weiss the added depth of being remarkably shallow. She won't even listen to someone she's not physically attracted to. I guess she just doesn't have a thing for blondes. And this is all around a pretty good episode for Weiss, because it also confirms that she does indeed have daddy issues.
Are you sure you wouldn't like me to patch you through to your father before you go?
Yes, I'm sure.
Which was painfully obvious since the second she appeared on screen. But I'm just happy that it comes up in a way that's relevant to the story. Weiss uses her family connection to obtain records, which are actually useful later.
The Schnee Company records singled out Vale as the primary target for dust robberies.
Oh my god, it's like they're actually trying to tell a story. Or maybe they're just trying to annoy us. Weiss makes this comment.
We could have just as easily made a call from the library.
Which means that trudging halfway across the city was completely pointless save for satisfying RWBY's curiosity. And to make bumping into Penny slightly less contrived. And when I say slightly less, I use that term loosely, because having RWBY's butterfingers slip and throw the phone halfway across the square only to land at Penny's feet is only one step below having RWBY drop the scroll at Beacon and kick it Buster Keaton style halfway across Vale until it ends up at Penny's feet anyway. So they had to include this meeting with Penny in the least contrived way possible. But did they at least accomplish that? Going on an admittedly irrelevant errand only to bump into someone who shouldn't even be outside in the first place?
You should know better than to go running around in a strange city.
Surprisingly, this chain of events is actually more contrived than what it had to be. Because you see, Penny is a student at Beacon. Or else why would she be here at the dance? Why would her handlers allow her to go to some dance? And while we're at it, why were Sun and Neptune allowed to go? I mean, the continuity in this show is seriously fucked. We have 3 conflicting set pieces. The school year, the Vital Festival, and the tournament. And here's what we know. The tournament takes place during the Vital Festival.
The Vital Festival! There will be dances, parades, a tournament!
And that takes place at the end of the school year.
Tournament at the end of the year.
A school year is usually 9 months long.
The Vital Festival is only a few months away.
So combatants have to show up 9 fucking months in advance?
Students visiting from Vacua will be arriving by ship today.
9 months minus however much time was skipped to facilitate showing us these flashbacks?
Cardin has been picking on you since the first week of school.
That would be ridiculously impractical if this tournament was held annually. And Mistral holds tournaments annually, so why not Vale?
She's won the Mistral regional tournaments 4 years in a row.
Which means that Pura was 12 years old when she won her first tournament. Does that mean that 12-year-olds will be competing this time around? One of the matches in this tournament could be a 12-year-old versus a robot? So are these people technically enrolled at Beacon? Why did most of them show up for the second semester?
Welcome to Beacon!
But Sun was in Vale for both semesters. Did he play hooky from his school in Mistral for 20 weeks? How did his team feel about that? Are all these transfer students here for the tournament? That's 139 students, not counting anyone from Vale or Sun or Penny. So this tournament's gonna have 256 contestants? Can adults fight? Or do you have to be under 18? Is winning this thing important in some way? If so, wouldn't people from the same kingdoms intentionally forfeit to increase the chances of getting their best into the finals? If it's not important, why would kingdoms let entire classrooms worth of students take an entire year off school? Does the kingdom hosting the tournament send all the students that aren't participating in the tournament off to other schools? Why would someone who willingly signed up to spend their life dying in a field care about some tournament? What's going on in this series? And why should we care? Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. The point I was trying to make is that if Penny goes to Beacon, why couldn't Ruby have just run into her inside Beacon? And if she doesn't go to Beacon, how the hell did she get into this dance? Seems like she's supposed to be there, seeing as how she's in a prom dress and accompanied by soldiers. It's not like she just wandered in off the street. Don't you think it's weird for the science project of some foreign general to be taken to a party only to stand there surrounded by armed guards? I don't even know what this is supposed to imply. Did Ozpin invite her? Did Ironwood arrange for her to come? If Penny's just a student at Beacon, why are there guards there? I can't decide what's weirder. Penny going to Beacon and never being seen or mentioning it to Ruby?
Where have you been?
Just say Beacon.
It isn't safe to talk here.
Seriously, just say you'll be at the dance on Sunday. Or if it's weirder that Rooster Teeth hired incompetent hacks who never put a single thought into the context of the scenes they're writing. That location from the yellow trailer comes back.
Blondie, you're here. Why?
Oh, goddammit, Jack. What happened? You were the best part of the yellow trailer. What was that? Well, okay, no human being would say it like that instead of, Blondie, why are you here? So the writing shares some of the blame. But what kind of a read was that? If you absolutely had to say those lines in that order, the why should have been truncated and demanding, and your here should have been stated matter-of-factly, not as a question. I mean, the rest of Junior's lines aren't even so bad. I mean, they are, but you know what I mean. Blake and Sun go to a White Fang recruitment meeting to gather intel, which sounds like a pretty good idea to me. But this raises a question. Was Blake the first person who thought of this idea? Even this cop who suspected the White Fang were involved.
You thinking the, White Fang?
Has no one ever considered putting a mole in the White Fang? No pun intended. Remember, an entire semester of time passed since the first robbery, and the White Fang were suspects. If finding evidence was as easy as going to a recruitment meeting, why hasn't anyone done that until now? Is that supposed to imply that no one in Vale understands the concept of an undercover operation except Blake? The setting of your story wasn't born in the opening scene. You have to write your story as if the world it takes place in was functional before the main character gets introduced. Otherwise, everyone in the audience capable of conscious thought will have to ask themselves stupid questions like this in order to justify your incompetence against the narrative. Where was I? So Blake and Sun go to the place, and oh no, Torchwick is there, being a silver-tongued devil as usual.
What's a human doing here?
I'm glad you asked, dearie.
But this scene is actually pretty nice, because at first viewing it actually manages to cast Torchwick's alignment in an ambiguous light. From this scene we could be led to believe that he has some ulterior motive for working with Cinder, or that he legitimately supports the White Fang or something like that. It's a pretty good speech and it's well delivered, so kudos. This is one of the few scenes in the series with an effective build-up and a legitimate payoff later on. Even if the payoff is something I'll get to later, but I'm trying to keep this analysis at least pseudo-chronological, even if it means I have to repeat myself once or twice. And then we continue on with some lines that I thought were build up to something, but turned out to be nothing.
Thanks to my employer, we've managed to snag a few before they hit the shelves.
And again, I'll get to that later on, as to not disrupt the chronology of this review. Torchwick uses his power of persuasion to rally all these new recruits to fight for the cause of exterminating humanity, and the shifting crowd makes Blake and Sun stick out like sore thumbs. And it would have been a rather intense scene if it hadn't cut away to this completely pointless scene of Junior telling Yang that his appearance in the series was completely useless.
I don't know.
Yeah, fuck dramatic pacing. We have a lot of nothing we need to catch up on. So Blake has the bright idea to turn off the lights. Again, no pun intended, because Torchwick can't see in the dark. But Blake and Sun can, because they're Faunus. And Faunus have near-perfect night vision.
Many Faunus are known to have nearly perfect sight in the dark.
And thank God there aren't any other Faunus in this room, or the writers would seem really retarded if it ended up working. Oh. So, did Torchwick's giant mech just trample through this crowd of new recruits in the dark? Those mech feet should be covered in blood. I mean, there's no way in hell that he could have avoided a crowd because, you know, he can't see in the dark.
He can't see in the dark.
And this building seems way too small and tightly packed for those White Fang members to have cleared a path for him that fast. Anyway, let's rewind a little so I can bring up something that's not really important, it's just a thought I had. So Blake shoots this fuse box and the lights go out, and fine, that follows logically, but human flesh of even the most pathetic and or unconscious person is completely impervious to physical damage, because aura. So why not hire a guard to stand in front of your important shit? Or just skin them and drape a cape of flesh over something as important as your central circuit breaker? Could you even skin someone? I mean, here we see Weiss is pretty clearly unconscious, and she takes this chainsaw to the midsection like a champ. So what if someone needed heart surgery? Could a doctor cut through your chest? I mean, couldn't people learn the techniques the doctors use to perform surgery and apply them to fighting? Anyway, that was just a thought. Let's get back to the, I feel obliged to point out yet another glaring inconsistency in the lore of the show. Or maybe it's an animation error. I've given up trying to distinguish between the two. Back in Volume 1, it was stated that faunas have impeccable night vision, even though we just saw that they really fucking don't. But that was given as the reason why the faunas won the Battle of Fort Castle.
Who can tell me the advantage the faunas had over General Lagoon's forces?
It's night vision.
And the problem I have with this is, well, just look at this scene. This thing is running faster than cars, and Blake and Sun are keeping pace with it. Yang needs a motorcycle to keep up with it, but Blake and Sun on foot are just speeding past it. So why wasn't the ability to outrun cars listed as the reason the faunas won so many battles? If humans need motorcycles to keep up. And it's already established that no human has ever had a semblance that increased their speed before.
The power associated with a wielder's semblance is completely unique.
How did the faunas lose any battles to the human if they could outrun them and see in the dark?
I remember seeing hologram railings, I was like, are you serious?
So let me talk strategy for a second here, because this is a really dumb fight scene. Right here we see that this thing's 360-degree laser targeting system is thrown off by a little steam. And what the hell, it's not 2004 anymore, steam isn't that bad. Anyway, Blake and Yang run around in circles until Torchwick targets the very point that RWBY is going to lunge from, which is just bad teamwork. Then each pair does a combo attack, so Miles and Carrie get to shout out a bunch of ship names for some reason. But the only pair that doesn't have a team attack is RWBY and Yang. Speed and strength would arguably be the most effective combo against this thing. And if you'd think using your brain, the two characters who would spend most of their free time practicing tandem attacks together would probably be fucking sisters. But I guess they didn't want to promote the idea of fucking sisters, now did they? Anyway, after that bullshit, Weiss uses her OP Ice Stasis debuff, and Yang uses her copyright infringement attack on Dragon Ball Z to end the fight in one hit.
Just got this thing clean.
I thought you just stole it off the assembly line. Ah, fuck it. So this character shows up in just the nick of time to help Torchwick bitch off like a total pussy. Again. So if I was the leader of Team RWBY, I would use my goddamn head for half a second and realize what a broken combination of teammates I had. Every strategy meeting would revolve around finding new and inventive ways for Blake to kick the ever-loving shit out of Yang, and have Weiss throw up walls of ice everywhere. Or just keep freezing the enemies, whichever seems more effective. And just have Blake and RWBY clobber the fuck out of Yang until she's in critical health and the glitch that allows her to stack the red tearstone ring effect kicks in. And I'm not saying I came up with that plan within 10 seconds of hearing this line.
With each hit, she gets stronger.
I'm saying I came up with that plan before she finished saying that line.
Where are Sun and Neptune?
Hold on, I thought they were trying to get into Weiss and Blake's pants respectively. Why would they just abandon them like this is a simple walk? What? Why are the visual gags in this show so funny? Simple walk. Where was I? What? Oh. How and why was this fight allowed to happen? I mean, was it supposed to be Juniper versus Cardinal, but Jean, Nora, and Lai were all incapacitated because Nora accidentally used the wrong flowers to make syrup? Who suggested it? Did all of Cardinal want to fight Pyrrha at once? Why would Pyrrha agree to that?
I want to show Pyrrha beating the crap out of all of Team Cardinal in a preliminary tournament qualifier.
Yes.
So wait, you need to win a 4-on-1 fight to qualify for the tournament? Do you realize how stupid that sounds? I mean, the whole point of Pyrrha's character is that she keeps her semblance a secret.
We could just keep it our little secret.
As stated in this very episode.
She doesn't broadcast her power.
And the Season 1 commentary.
She just happens to fight a lot of dudes with metallic weapons.
Why would she agree to any fight with spectators? Especially when she's not being compelled to do so.
I'm afraid Miss Nikos has just finished a match.
She doesn't broadcast her power.
No, it's fine. I'd be happy to oblige.
I mean, don't get me wrong, these are both well choreographed and animated fight scenes, but I can't get over the fact that they're even happening runs counter to everything we know about Pyrrha's character. And crap, Mercury, if you really wanted to know what Pyrrha's semblance was, you should have just showed up 2 days earlier. You would have seen her do this through any of these open windows facing the courtyard. So, after Team RWBY makes short work of Torchwick in his giant mech suit, and force him to flee like a little bitch for a third time, Blake is stressing the fuck out. Because, Why? I don't know. Most likely reason is that Miles and Carrie are incapable of writing a scene, much less writing a series of scenes that play out in chronological order to convey some sort of narrative. But it's not like they're lead writers for a multi-million-dollar entertainment company now, is it? But anyway, Blake is having this completely uncharacter and out-of-left-field response to what was essentially winning a fight. Who knows, maybe Blake legitimately doesn't want to go to this dance because of all the imaginary sexual tension between her and Yang.
I don't want you to stop.
Yeah, you like hearing that, don't you? Yeah, Blake, don't stop.
I want you to slow down.
Yeah, girl, slow down. She's just using the Torchwick excuse as cover because she's not ready to come out of the closet yet.
Cue the Barry White.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'll stop pointing out how unintentionally hilarious the dialogue is.
Your grades have been suffering.
You know, I thought huntsmen were supposed to be the defenders of the world.
They're supposed to be the defenders of the world.
What exactly are they being graded on? Their ability to not die right away in combat? Shouldn't they all be passing since they're all still alive? Do they only send their best and brightest off to die in a field somewhere gut-torn by a grim attack? I understand the inherent value in being educated in certain fields like history, anatomy, or botany, but if they're already locked into a life of fighting grim, what do grades matter? Why does Blake care about something that's going on inside the kingdom if she's already set on a career path that will take her out of it forever? The only thing huntsmen ever do, as established by the series up to this point, is go off to fight grim outside the kingdom, never to be heard from again, or teach at a huntsman academy. So what the fuck are huntsmen? I don't know what they do, and I don't know why someone would ever willingly choose to go to a huntsman academy. Is it sinking in how important the answer to that question is? If we never see or hear about a huntsman doing anything other than dying or teaching, it makes it very, very hard to understand or relate to any of these characters because all of their motivations are tied into becoming a huntsman. And then we check back in on the bad guys. Well, actually, the next scene is some teen melodrama no one cares about.
There's plenty of fish in the sea.
I can only hope that that was some vaguely racist remark about the promiscuity of fish faunus.
Give me them cephalopods,
Season
girl.
3.
Anyway, in the first episode of this volume, I was really impressed with Jessica Negri's acting because she sounded sort of haunting and softly intimidating, which was pretty cool.
Oh, Roman, have a little faith.
And it made her feel like she really was Torchwick's boss and that he shouldn't question her. But here in this scene, she's still doing that voice, and these two couldn't give less than a fuck.
Ah, the invincible girl.
She's smart, but I wouldn't say invincible.
This scene really took her from being someone with a coldly calculated exterior persona to being some douchebag who thinks she's a lot cooler than she actually is. She's keeping up the act even when the only people that can hear her are so familiar with it they don't even react. I'd hate to suggest a way to fix this scene because the series is already a bugger's muddle, but they could have had Emerald and Mercury react to Cinder as if she was intimidating or scary. I mean, Torchwick runs the full range of emotions, and that's what makes him so likable. When he's in public, he plays the smooth criminal angle. When he's alone with his underlings, he's exasperated and grouchy. When he's with Emerald and Mercury, he tries to be as threatening as possible, and when he's in Cinder's presence, he gets all timid. Cinder just has this always-on, subtly threatening, vaguely demented tone that makes her seem unreal. But the fact that her cronies are desensitized to it makes her seem more like a joke than anything else. I could only imagine on the inside, Mercury's probably going, she's doing the voice again. And Emerald is like, shut up, her voice turns me on, and maybe if I flash at her some more, she'll finally notice me. But what she actually ended up saying was her semblance is polarity.
Her semblance is polarity.
Which, okay, everybody say it with me, raises some questions. Like, if a semblance is supposed to be unique?
The power associated with a wielder's semblance is completely unique.
Why does Emerald call it polarity? A big problem with this is that Mercury never swings anything that isn't made of metal at her. He bases this assumption on one data point. What if she can move anything with her mind? What if she can move bones with her mind? What if her semblance subconsciously influences people to miss their attacks? What if she has the ability to control air current? What if she has the ability to control the leather in his boots or the fabric in his socks? What if she has the ability to control anything that touches her right arm? What if her semblance allows her to cast repulsive force fields? I mean, it's basically impossible to make an accurate guess off of one data point anyway, so the fact that they actually guessed magnetism and decided to call magnetism polarity?
Her semblance is polarity.
Which is the same oddly specific term that Puri used in the first volume to describe her semblance?
My semblance is polarity.
Is so contrived I nearly vomited. And then she holds up a hair. At least I think it's a hair. Either way, it never comes up again, so I guess it doesn't matter. Thankfully, right in the middle, we get the best episode of the whole volume. The only one that isn't brought to a grinding halt by the nagging wonder of what the fuck a huntsman is and why we should care. I mean, that question is still there because it's omnipresent throughout the whole show, but at the very least it doesn't bring this particular episode to a grinding halt. This episode is so good, in fact, that it makes me believe that RWBY would be far better off if all of that shit about Torchwick and the Grimm and the Huntsman and Cinder and all that other pointless malarkey that Miles and Carrie have no idea how to write was just dropped from the show altogether. So Blake is stressing out about something that all of her friends agree is completely irrelevant and they decide to help her get over it. Wait, that makes sense. That's the first thing you've done all volume that makes sense. Thank you. This episode is consistently funny, with humor both drawn from the situation and from jokes.
Aren't they both the same?
And, of course, from racism. I mean, honestly, this is on par with me trying to distract my black friends with fried chicken. And I could also point out how impossible the positioning of this laser pointer is compared to Yang's position, and I guess I just did, so moving on. And this scene between Lai and Jean is the funniest part of the series since Birdie No. But in sharp contrast to that scene, which was an unexpected sight gag followed by an ad-lib, this is a slow, uncomfortable build-up pitting two characters with almost diametrically opposed personalities against each other. And if I'm being perfectly honest, it's one of the only times where knowing as little about Lai as we do is actually beneficial.
I like that they have a relationship even though like they have so little interaction.
That's actually commentary from a completely different scene. I just edited it right here to make Monty seem smarter. The only thing that we really know for sure about Lai is that he's generally stoic, and we see that begin to crack oh so subtly against Jean's adorably oblivious nature. And what elevates the scene above an uncomfortable bromance moment is when Nora— wait, is she wearing a boob shirt? Oh god damn it, first with Queen of the Castle and now this. Do I have to tell you jackasses what flanderization is? And what's the context of this in reality? Does Nora screen print a t-shirt every time she says something that makes Lai crack a smile? What did the fourth wall ever do to you? And having the quintessential childhood friend characters not showing any romantic interest in each other is just amazing. And it shows a level of maturity and understanding of interpersonal relationships on Nora's part, which actually implies that Jean would get more useful information out of it if he talked to Nora about this instead.
Nora, I said headphones on!
Which ends up making the scene that much funnier. Situational irony. You know it's good because you remembered learning about it in 3rd grade English. This scene also kind of un-retconned something that pissed me off about the first volume, and that was by confirming Pyrrha's romantic interest in Jean, also courtesy of Nora.
Practice what you preach, Pyrrha.
In Volume 1, Pyrrha did a lot of stupid things, and I always figured she was just acting like that because she was attracted to Jean, but the writers shit all over that by saying,
our belief is that Pyrrha acts this way towards everybody.
Except the way we decided to portray it was by having her turn ice down cold and fawn over Jean like she was a magpie and he was a shiny object. But at least now they're going back on that, and no, don't cut to another scene, I was enjoying that one so much. So in the same sense that Volume 1 was mainly about giving RWBY an initially antagonistic relationship with a spoiled bitch, only to eventually warm up to her once she learned how racist she was, the main thrust of Volume 2 is to mercilessly tease all the people who ship Blake and Yang. And I suppose that entails Yang telling Blake her childhood story completely unprovoked. But at least she offers the story as a sort of ultimatum.
But first you have to sit down and listen to what I have to say.
Anyway, the gist of the story is that Tai Yang Xiaolong is a horrible father. One of the worst fathers in all of anime, and that's a pretty impressive title because he has to compete with Goku.
Krillin? Huh? I think I'll take a senzu bean now. Thanks. Hey, Cell! It's only fair to let him fight Gohan at full strength, don't you think?
So RWBY's parents are both huntsmen. One of them is a teacher, and one of them probably died in a field somewhere. Fuck! But that's not the point of this story. Yang shares this little nugget of information.
Summer wasn't the first love he'd lost. The first was my mom.
So within 15 months of being abandoned by your wife who just had your kid, you've already knocked up your high school crush? And, you know, I'm just guessing 15 months, but in my defense, they never said that years or pregnancies worked any different in Remnant than they do on Earth.
It's not like weird science fiction ages, like they're just 15 yeah.
He tried to keep Yang's real mom a secret, but once she found out, he didn't even help her get over it or find closure.
It was all I thought about.
She even went to other people for help, and her dad still never stepped up to be a parent.
I would ask anybody I could what they knew about her.
No wonder Yang was so fucked up in Volume 1. And on that note, why isn't she still fucked up? I mean, they just dropped her bipolar schizophrenia. That was her defining character trait last volume, and they didn't even replace it with anything.
Well, That was a thing.
I mean, she even takes the end of a fight semi-seriously in this volume.
So I guess he got a new henchman.
It's just disappointing because now she has canon justification for her personality disorders, but they're completely gone from her character. What happened to her rapid, unwarranted mood swings? I mean, that used to be her entire character. And don't tell me she was on the rag for the entirety of Volume 1. I mean, she clearly hasn't gotten over the trauma that messed her up in the first place.
To this day, I still want to know what happened to my mother.
I mean, with the story trying to give her more focus this volume, we really need to actually see her personality. Instead, we get a completely different person, which kind of proves my point about the writing in Volume 1 being really bad. But at least then we had something to work with. And that's the problem with so bad it's good. Volume 1 was one step away from being campy. And then when the writing gets just a little bit better, the show gets a lot less interesting. But all in all, that little flashback wasn't so bad. What are they talking about now?
If Roman Torchwick walked through that door, what would you do?
You'd probably kick his ass without breaking a sweat, just like you did the last time you fought him, and that was before your first semester of huntsman training, so you're better now, right?
You'd lose!
Oh.
You can't even stop me!
Well, Yang, you did destroy a military-grade mech with one hit, so you're significantly more powerful than Blake. I don't even think it's a fair comparison to make. And then there's a scene of Weiss being cute and Jean being sad, and it's just such a welcome departure from the rest of the show in the sense that it's actually good. They managed to convey everything Jean is feeling without breaking show don't tell. And that's very weird for this series. But when they actually do the job of conveying a story in a visual medium, it's a nice change of pace. It's a welcome break to have shot composition and cinematography take the forefront for once. And, you know, to have it be good. In Volume 1, I praised the cinematography for the most part and wrote off most of the generic blocking as a technical limitation, but I may have been wrong to do so. Because in this volume's commentary, they draw attention to the blocking and cinematography in a way that makes me feel sick to my stomach with laughter and sadness.
You know what's really great?
What, Monty? What's really great?
This exposition stuff in any other anime is you sit down and talk about it for like 20 minutes, and nothing happens but the camera may scroll from left to right.
Monty, in RWBY Volume 2, there are 41 minutes in which characters sit, stand, walk, or lie in uninspired configurations, and the only camera motion to be seen is slow panning, whip panning, or reverse shot editing. And that's more than double the 20 minutes you seem to be complaining about. I mean, that line in the commentary literally plays over a scene where characters are standing around in a circle, and the camera is fucking panning from right to left. So Monty is claiming that RWBY is so far above other anime because the camera scrolls in the other direction?
If there's always movement, it just makes the scene more interesting.
Yeah, but as long as that movement is from right to left. Oh hey, look! The camera's scrolling from left to right. I guess you failed as a creative visionary. Uh-oh, left to right again. The exact same type of bad blocking and cinematography you're bragging about not using takes up damn near 30% of the runtime of your show. And, what was I talking about? Oh, right, my favorite episode. Yeah, okay, I remember. The scene is also setting up to have our expectations subverted in the next episode, which is also a good thing. Despite that, based on me having said, the best episode of the whole volume, you can infer that it's all gonna be downhill from here anyway. RWBY has difficulty walking in high heels. Let's forget that immediately, and hope it never comes up again. More shipping fuel, and then...
I told you she would come.
Hey, I thought I was gonna stop pointing out how unintentionally hilarious the dialogue was. And next comes the scene that makes the whole volume. And unlike the scene that made the whole volume last time around, I actually think this one might matter beyond this one scene. A lot of stuff that's going on inside RWBY's head finally comes to light for the audience. And yes, this is just another scene of characters standing around and talking.
That's all they ever do.
But this time it actually works in context, and I'm on the fence about giving them credit for setting up a tonal juxtaposition, but maybe I could give them credit for consistently characterizing RWBY since episode 1. This scene works on a number of levels. Unlike every other time where characters just stand there and talk, this one is happening in a ballroom instead of a cafeteria, or a dorm room, or on the sidewalk, or in some other boring, pointless backdrop that adds no depth to the conversation taking place. In this ballroom, everyone else in the shot is dancing, and the visual dissonance is key, and also why having the shadow people wouldn't work anymore. This is a snapshot of Ruby's life and how it compares to everyone else's. And this would probably be a good time to see Yang with one of those quote-unquote friends of hers from episode 2. She's never seen with them again, and yet she's willing to abandon her sister in the quad for them. Abandon her sister just like her mom abandoned her when she was a baby. What the fuck? Have you no compassion, you fucking cunt? No, back to the positive stuff. This is my favorite scene of the volume, after all. This is Ozpin talking to Ruby person to person. For some reason. I like to think it's because she reminds Ozpin of her mom.
You have silver eyes.
Or maybe it's because she reminds Ozpin of himself. Either way, I think this scene is subtly trying to reinforce the weight of her own mortality. This 46-second scene has 3 reiterations of the same point. He's trying to drill in the point that by choosing to be a huntress, she or people she cares about are going to die, as per the dying or teaching thing that I've been banging on about all video. And in a valiant attempt to appeal to Ruby's naivety and optimism, the very traits that are keeping her from getting the picture in the first place, he softens the denotation while hardening the connotation of the message with each attempt.
Well, you can't spend your entire life on the battlefield, even if you may want to.
Here he's directly telling Ruby that enjoying herself is a necessary part of life. But Ruby doesn't get it.
Yeah, that lesson's been floating around a lot lately.
And without dropping a beat, he repeats himself.
Fighting and dancing aren't so different.
Ozpin is comparing something Ruby wants to do with something everyone except Ruby wants to do, and then makes a thinly veiled reference to death.
Although, one wrong move on the ballroom merely leads to a swollen foot.
Which Ruby completely misinterprets.
Or a twisted ankle.
And as a cherry on top, he opened that statement with,
"If you think about it."
Which is exactly what I do when I know I'm right and I want you to listen to me. And hopefully you've noticed that Ozpin doesn't actually respond to anything Ruby says. He just immediately jumps into telling Ruby how important enjoying the little things are. Or will become, as the case may be.
It's not every day that friends are able to come together like this.
So do you remember the last time I gushed over a scene like this?
I've made more mistakes than any man, woman, and child on this planet.
Call it my optimism getting the better of me, but I believe that all of Ozpin's mistakes revolve around not heeding the advice that he's so desperately trying to give Ruby at this very moment.
Nights like these are ones we'll never forget.
And this perfectly articulates the mindset of both characters. He expected to live his whole life on the battlefield just like Ruby, but survived, and didn't leave a life worth remembering. And since he was so focused on combat, he's forgotten all of his teammates by now. And he doesn't want the same fate to befall Ruby.
But it's nights like these that can help keep them stronger than ever.
So there's the lesson. Ruby needs to make the most of the time she has with her friends, because they'll all end up dead in a ditch long before her. I'm putting way too much stock in the assumption that any of this was intentional, aren't I? Oh well, let's just make a bad joke and bitch about some inconsistent characterization. And of course we can't hear what Weiss is saying to this guy because it probably has a lot of words that start with N. Yeah, I make that joke, but Weiss's racism is almost completely gone in this volume. And well, I kinda want to know what happened to it. In Volume 1 she was defined by racism, bitchiness, and daddy issues. And daddy issues are still going strong, but she didn't say one racist thing all volume.
I think, honestly, my favorite thing to happen in RWBY Volume 2 is getting to see Weiss trying to be a friendly person.
I mean, she wasn't tempered by this.
Be not the best leader, but the best person you can be.
And this was the only scene from Volume 1 that's even worth bringing up. If any of this characterization was intentional...
Was it mostly planned?
Does it mean she was tempered by this?
Do you have any idea of how long we've been searching for you?
Nearly 2 days.
12 hours.
Wait a minute.
12 hours of door duty after a 36-hour nap is what made her realize the error of her ways? But she was still being all racist to Sun in the last scene of Volume 1. So was it something that happened off-screen that we're not privy to? I mean, all of her bitchiness was warranted this volume. She snaps at Sun, but he did just sort of admit that he spies on them all the time. And he's a faunus, but she didn't even bring that up. And she shoots down Jean's advances, but nobody cares about Jean's feelings except Miles.
Ice Queen.
Why does everyone keep calling me that?
Yeah, I'm actually wondering that myself. Weiss and Yang got ruined by this volume. They did so little to set up character traits in Volume 1 that they can't just drop them for no reason. Weiss isn't the insufferable racist bitch we all know and loathe. Yang isn't the schizophrenic manic depressive from the first volume either. And the worst part is that those traits weren't even replaced by anything. So Weiss is just the daddy issues girl, and Yang has been replaced by a void of nothingness. And here's where the series plunges into a tragically hilarious nosedive, with the reminder that, oh yes, it's a show about terrorism that's poorly written. So then a bunch of stuff that's really hard to care about happens between Jean and Pura.
When you're placed on a pedestal like that for so long, you become separated from the people that put you there in the first place.
I mean, oh wow, I care about this Mary Sue so much because being too perfect is her flaw. Well, no one's pointing a gun at her head and forcing her to be perfect. But even if they were, she has magnet powers, so she could probably handle a gun, even though lead isn't magnetic. But aluminum isn't either, so what the fuck is her problem? Hey, you know, if you wanted to be more approachable and relatable, why didn't you just throw the fight against Cardinal? Or why didn't you ask Jean out? Put some effort in. I already mentioned how Penny being at the dance makes just about as much sense as anyone considering Miles or Carrie a writer. And this dance number apparently signals these lookouts, who aren't posted with an eye shot of an exit, that it's time to commence with the operation. Shouldn't they have been signaled when the last student arrived at the dance? Not when everyone started dancing? But more importantly than that, shouldn't they be standing next to the exit? If you were watching the exit, you might notice someone leaving the room you're supposed to be guarding. Now it comes time to bitch about yet another poorly written action scene. Cinder goes sprinting across the rooftops like one of those assholes in Assassin's Creed multiplayer who doesn't know how the game works. Which I suppose is forgivable because her brain-dead lookouts who aren't watching the front door did just tell her that nobody would be outside to see her. But she is seen, and she doesn't even have an appropriate reaction to it later on.
A little more exciting than expected.
They seriously could have blown the whole lot by botching their only job. Maybe if Cinder had the depth of character to break from her smooth-talking dipshit voice for long enough to chew these bumblefucks out from messing up their only job, this would make for an interesting scene, but no. But if she had walked on the ground, she hardly would have drawn any attention at all. Does the term hiding in plain sight mean anything to you? And she stealthily sneaks up to this guard and... ow. Maybe you should get your money back on that helmet. But she doesn't take anything off his person, like a key card or something. If her plan was to be stealthy, she didn't even need to knock that guy out. And then when you consider that that room that ultimately contains her goal was directly connected to the ballroom, why didn't she just infiltrate from there? Does that door only open from the inside? Would figuring out a way to open that door from the other side be less convenient than the plan they went with? Wait, didn't she go up an elevator to get to that room? And the ballroom is on the ground level. You had 3 characters go up that elevator. Did you forget it was there? Did you forget that you weren't on the ground floor anymore after going up in an elevator? Did MC Escher design Veil? After going out of her way to stealthily take out a guard that wasn't obstructing her path and not even bothering to hide his body properly, she nonchalantly walks into a room full of armed guards. And no, just no. You walk up to the guard outside nonchalantly to get the drop on him.
This area is off limits.
It's fine, it's fine.
You'll have to go back up, ma'am, or I'll have to treat you as a threat.
Where exactly is the threat?
The guards on the inside know you shouldn't be there because there are guards on the outside whose job it is to keep you out. These guards are fucking retarded. Whoever hired them should certainly not be promoted to head of security at the end of this volume.
The best option is to appoint General Ironwood as head of security for the event.
Oh fuck. Huh. I wonder why Miles and Carrie would want to make a guy who made a couple of terrible hiring decisions come out looking good at the end. And she's not even wearing her mask in this scene, so she must be killing all these guards, or else they would be able to identify her based on, oh hey, there's her mask. Oh, and it's off again. And back on, and off, and on. And these 2 doofuses see a room full of their dead colleagues and a masked woman standing in front of them, and they're just standing there, stiff as their own dicks, after they realize that Cinder could not possibly be wearing a bra in that outfit. So RWBY finds this guard who was knocked out for no reason, and instead of trying to wake him up, or anything, she decides to take matters into her own hands, and we learn something very important about her. She doesn't keep proper footwear in her combat locker. And she doesn't even decide to go in barefoot, even though it's been shown in multiple scenes that she has trouble walking in high heels.
We had a hardcore Die Hard reference. Yeah. RWBY doesn't wear heels, so she kept tripping up in the fight, and because Cinder fights with glass, she was gonna get her feet all cut up. Yeah. Total John McClane style.
Are you fucking kidding me? The only good idea this guy's had in possibly his entire life doesn't make it into the script? So instead of ripping off one of the best action movies of all times, you decide to constantly play up the fact that RWBY can't walk in heels and then never show them hinder her balance during the fight scene? Did the guy who animated this fight scene even read the script? Did he watch the animation leading up to the fight? Did the people doing the post have brains in their heads? Noticing something like Cinder's mask popping on and off between cuts is Clearly an animation error, but conscious thought was put into building up Ruby's inability to walk in heels as a plot point.
That's Barbara mocap?
Barbara mocap. Is that you? Nope, that's Barbara too.
That was in the script and someone did actual work to make it appear on screen.
Can we have a serious talk about how Weiss fights in these?
That was a line in the script, and yet Ruby has no problem fighting in high heels, so I guess she must have answered her own question. Are we even going to get one line to pay off that setup?
We also had the tech limitation of she just can't take her shoes off.
You work around your technical limitation. The beauty of having technical limitations is that you have to use your creativity to work around them. If you truly can't put in the work to model formal wear Ruby without shoes, which baffles me, because you put in the work to model formal wear Penny, even though there is no reason in a frozen hell for her to be at that dance, then you make her fall down during the fight scene. And if you're too fucking lazy to do that, you add a line where Ruby self-awarely realizes that she is able to fight in heels too. As a result, not only is there another character trait that's established and dropped without any payoff, but it leads to a contrivance allowing Cinder to escape. They had an opportunity for Cinder to escape that practically wrote itself, and they fucked it up. Then Ironwood shows up, Cinder disappears, and Ruby is left holding the bag. This episode ends, and the next episode picks up in a completely different location under a completely different context. And if you have to wait a week between episodes, you might not notice the absurd jump. But in the version of RWBY they're charging money for, these scenes are so close together that the only conclusion you can logically reach is that Ironwood walked up to RWBY, forgot what he was doing there because he's so old and senile that he hires guards who failed to shoot deadly masked intruders just because they can see her cleavage, and then Moon walks out of the room to go yell at Ozpin before realizing, oh right, that RWBY girl saw the whole thing. So they mentioned they hit a wall when writing this scene.
This was another one of those scenes, Carrie, where we just hit a wall.
Look, the reason you hit a wall is because this scene doesn't have any narrative flow. Your subconscious is trying to tell you that this scene doesn't belong here because it clashes so hard with the end of the last one.
They were here!
Who were they? The White Fang? Because that's wrong. There was only one person there last night.
I'd feel better if my bad guy catching record wasn't 0 for 3.
Is there some third bad guy who she failed to catch between seasons? Because I only remember Torchwick and Cinder. And if she's counting multiple instances of failing to catch the same bad guy, she would be 0 for 4. And if she's counting Neo, wouldn't she have to count the helicopter lady from the first volume because she hasn't made the connection that these two are the same person yet, also making her 0 for 4? But we've already established that Miles doesn't know how to count to 4, so I guess I have to let this one slide. Failing to count to 4 properly is the most consistent thing he's done in the whole goddamn series.
While most kingdoms only call on its citizens to serve, others find it important to be prepared.
She was wearing a mask.
So that means you didn't see her face.
She never said anything to me.
So that means you didn't hear her voice.
But I know she fought with glass.
Well, that's something at least.
Her clothing lit up whenever she attacked.
Well, that's all fine and good, but...
Embedding dust into clothing is an age-old technique.
So what does Glinda have to say about all this?
Save for the glass... That sounds like the woman I fought the night we met RWBY.
Whoa, Glinda, way to jump to fucking conclusions. What exactly are you basing that on? Not knowing what either woman looks or sounds like? The woman from episode 1 wasn't even wearing a mask. The only reason you couldn't see her face is because it was obscured by shadow. The only identifying piece of information you have is about glass and you ignore that to make your connection?
Save for the glass.
That's the laziest lucky hunch I've ever heard. The only connection you can possibly make between them is that they both use
an age-old technique.
And they don't even use the same fighting style, and yet, yep, that must be the girl I saw once over 20 weeks ago. I guess if Mercury can accurately guess Pyrrha's semblance off one piece of information, why can't Glinda guess Cinder's identity off of -1 pieces of information? RWBY's written like all the characters have the fucking script memorized, but the production staff doesn't even know what's going on. RWBY could have just said she was stacked. At least that would have been an identifiable feature. RWBY jumps on this awful screenwriting to tell Ozpin about all the information they gathered.
You think this girl's connected to Torchwick and the White Fang?
Well, I say they. I mean, Blake is the only one who got useful information out of it.
Many of your brothers have already moved down to our new operation in the southeast.
That raises the question of why did they even sit on it for so long? Shouldn't they have told Ozpin immediately after they found out? Shouldn't they have just dropped an anonymous call from a payphone to Huntsman HQ or somewhere? That would have been a very easy way to make Blake feel better. And if RWBY was itching at the bit to tell Ozpin about the secret hideout, why didn't she just make up a connection to Torchwick? That would have been better screenwriting than having Glinda make this connection based on negative evidence. What did they gain by keeping it a secret for so long? And why didn't Ozpin act on it? Instead of assembling a team of graduated huntsmen to investigate this, he sends some goddamn kids? Is Ozpin really some senile old man who skated through life on the good graces of sounding a lot like Agent Washington? He couldn't possibly have thought their intel was accurate, or else he would have done something solid about it. Right?
Trusting Ozpin kind of pays off.
No, it really doesn't. They show up outgunned and outmanned at the bad guys' hideout and are unable to stop them from carrying out their plan.
It's,
very little gets past him.
Yeah.
You think this girl's connected to Torchwick and the White Fang?
We still lack the required evidence to link the two together.
So at least that didn't get past him.
And stuff that does, sometimes maybe he chooses to let it get past him.
I think I remember her saying something about a hideout or something.
I thought you said the intruder never—
Glinda, why are you arguing against information that supports your wild-ass baseless assumption? What is she like? If this one is able to talk, those two can't be the same person based on my whole 46 seconds worth of experience with one of them. This is just another cheeky animation error, but how did Ozpin manage to step in front of Glinda if he was behind this desk?
He's gonna trust in them a little bit.
Why exactly does he trust freshmen to do something that every cop and huntsman in Vale has already failed at?
Help them out so they don't get themselves killed.
They all could have very easily died if Weiss was delayed for another couple of seconds. And in considering that she was unconscious just moments before the collision, that was a strong possibility.
We send as many troops as we can to the southeast, find out exactly what's going on, and eradicate any forces that stand in our way.
You treat every situation like it's a contest of measuring
The phallic chair.
But he sort of has a point.
This may go beyond Vale.
Why are you telling a general from Atlas who is already involved that this may go beyond Vale? Isn't that already reason to investigate?
And if this truly is part of some master plan for which we know not the final move, we mustn't be so bold.
Everything Ozpin says is garbage.
Nor can we risk the spread of panic.
How is letting the bad guys carry out their plans unmolested going to cut down on panic?
I have served you faithfully for years.
What does that mean? How does someone from Atlas serve someone from Vale? How does a general serve a university administrator? Everything everyone says is garbage.
Which do you send in first? The flag bearer or the scouts?
So then why didn't you send in scouts instead of sending in children who haven't been briefed properly?
Please try and be discreet about this matter.
I'm gonna send your friends to the front line, and I want it to be a surprise. So Yang is holding a piece of mail, and RWBY wants it. So instead of running towards the package, RWBY runs around Yang in a big circle and jumps on her back. And what was in that package, you ask? Well, a Cowboy Bebop reference, of course.
They should have a dog.
Apparently a 40-second take is very hard in animation, so credit where credit is due.
It took Harley forever to get this shot done, but it was worth it. It's such a long shot, too.
Blake is being very cute and funny in this scene, and it wouldn't have had the same effect if they spliced in multiple cuts to draw attention to it or away from it. As it is right now, it feels like I'm being rewarded for paying attention to the whole frame, unlike every other scene in the series. The one general aspect of the show that was greatly improved between volumes, besides the lighting, was the humor. The amount of times I laughed went up dramatically from the 7 times in Volume 1 that I laughed. And that's even discounting all of the times I cracked up at things that weren't supposed to be funny, like Ironwood's name.
Mr. Ironwood.
Ozpin has a speech.
It was a war of ignorance. A war that was about the very idea of individualism itself.
So which one is it? See, I remember this Michael Bay movie where Bruce Willis said,
"Drilling's a science. It's an art."
But I thought making good actors say 2 lines that directly contradict each other in the same sentence was a Michael Bay thing. But now Miles and Carey have Shannon McCormick doing it. Why do bad writers hate bald actors? Oh, J.J. Abrams wrote Armageddon's screenplay? Oh, Star Wars is fucked.
The destruction of all forms of art and self-expression.
I mean, as he goes on, you can obviously tell it's really the second one, and I suppose they threw in that line about ignorance just to annoy me.
Naming their children after one of the core aspects of art itself. Color.
Yeah, you know, fuck musicians and authors and poets and architects and all the directors before the time of colored cameras. Yeah. No, color. I mean, Weiss is German for white, Blake is Old English for black, and Jean is Latin for yellow. And a lot of the characters are just named after things that are a color. Like rubies are red, and doves are white, and the sky is blue. And how nice must it be to have a surname like Scarlatina? I guess you don't have to follow that stupid naming convention for generations. But what about Pura's name? I mean, Nikos Economopoulos is a famous photographer whose work was completely devoid of color. I mean, does that mean Pura's family was on the other side of the war? I guess not, because black and white are two of the main 4 colors, but still. But I mean, hardly any of the adults have colorful names, and they would be the children and grandchildren of the generation that fought in that war 80 years ago. So I recently found this RWBY character naming guide thing, and in it they say that Ozpin's name isn't supposed to be associated with a color. But based on how far they stretch the color connections to all the other characters' names, I think that's bullshit. Because Ozpin's name is an anagram of the Wizard of Oz's character, and the Wizard of Oz is very clearly associated with the Emerald City, and more specifically this image. So if you're going to say something that sounds a little like the Latin word for rock is associated with a color, then you need to admit that something that clearly evokes this image in your mind is also associated with a color. Okay, back to your regularly scheduled bitching and moaning. Peter doesn't have anything to do with a color. His last name Port sort of does, but according to the wiki, he's Port as in door, not Port as in red wine. Bartholomew Ooblik is only a reference to green if you're aware of Dr. Seuss, so add him to the list of people who must have been real in remnants at some point or another. Glinda Goodwitch doesn't have anything to do with color, neither does Tai Yang or Summer, or Roman for that matter.
We encourage individuality, expressionism, and unity.
By creating a bureaucratic system by which all your children must be named.
Through diversity.
Yeah, fucking right.
Remember your training.
Which our illustrious writers decided the audience did not need to see. This is all bullshit.
Just enough exposition.
Fuck you!
We determined that the concentration of Grimm was too extreme for first-year students.
So then why did you put it on the board? This is an auditorium full of first-year students.
As first-year students.
You know, you probably just put it on the board to fuck with these 4. Why aren't you sending any real huntsmen there? I know they're just setting him up as a fucking Mong now so they can fire him at the end of the volume, but wow. I mean, I made the joke about absinthe last time around. Was I fucking right?
Witnesses reported seeing robots and rose petals in a dance club.
Alright, which one of you smoked the rest of the crack before writing this line? There weren't any... Oh. Where did those come from? RWBY wasn't anywhere near this place at any point in time. She's still in the dumpster when this happens.
Well...
See, she doesn't know either. And there definitely weren't any robots at that dance club. Unless you're referring to the school dance as a dance club. And Penny as a robot.
I doubt I'll ever find the exact answers I'm looking for.
Ditto. 4 whole commentary tracks, not a single mention of why those rose petals are there.
Instead of waiting for you all to break the rules, why don't we just bend them?
You know, I think Ozpin is just trying way too hard to be part of the gang. I mean, this isn't Hogwarts. RWBY's not the boy who lived. And that's one of the things I actually really appreciate about this show. RWBY isn't special. No. Anyway, she's just a normal person that the story decided to focus on, so why is Ozpin micromanaging them like this? He's got an entire school full of students that he could be talking to.
Do not thank me for this.
Yeah, because it could very well end up getting you all killed.
Ren and Nora wanted to shadow the sheriff of a nearby village.
So Lai and Nora want to shadow the sheriff of a nearby village.
We set out tomorrow.
But doesn't the village security job start in 1 week? Are you gonna be in transit for 6 days? Are you shipping yourself there by UPS ground?
We mail ourselves there.
Or did the guy who filled in these job boards not read the script?
We're shadowing a crime specialist. We get junior badges.
Why does Jean get all goo-goo-eyed over junior detective badges? I thought he always wanted to be a huntsman.
This is what I've always wanted to be!
Wait, hold on. Why are these 2 even taking part in this mission?
Do they even go to that school?
They don't. Why are they on a mission? They don't even go there.
They don't go there.
They don't.
Are they there just to see stuff? They're not there to
That's what I'm saying. They're not there.
School.
See, this is an example of what we are told. We don't know this.
I think we should write Volume 3.
Absolutely.
I think
Aren't they just here for the tournament?
She wants to spy on them so she'll have the upper hand in the tournament.
So what, are they students or aren't they? What about the other 2 people on their team? So pretty much everything Ooblik says here is comedy gold. And it doesn't only come from the performance, even though Joel is amazing. He speaks really fast and in a jarring cadence, but he's written as though he's spoken that way for most of his adult life, and certainly throughout his teaching career. You see, he repeats himself a lot.
According to my schedule, we are already 3 minutes behind schedule!
Probably because he's figured out through experience that the majority of people aren't going to keep up on the first pass.
Our dear headmaster saw it fit to assign me to this particular assignment.
And he just can't train himself to slow down.
And now they've seen us.
What?
And now they've seen us!
Also, this line not only serves as a joke, but it shows us the unpredictability and danger in field missions. So, kudos. This is actually the kickoff to 6 really solid minutes of funny stuff and action stuff.
Get back in the bag.
And I mean, I did seriously enjoy this fight scene. I really liked all the split screening and weird letterboxing. My feelings can pretty much be summarized by one line from the commentary.
This is neat!
But then, like all good things, it comes to an end when the characters start talking. Ublik asks Blake, Yang, and Weiss why they wanted to be huntsmen. And their answers are all annoyingly off, especially Yang's.
I'm a thrill seeker. Well, that was a thing.
And then they take it all right back at the end of the episode, and I'm left feeling like I just got red herringed out of vital character information.
That's not what I meant.
I don't know. I don't know either. It doesn't matter. We know why we're here.
You know, there's an audience watching this train wreck. We might want to know anything, but you know, you're right, it doesn't matter, because in the next episode they bring it back with stuff that's even worse. I mean, take Weiss.
Please.
If I had taken a job in Atlas, it wouldn't have changed anything.
So instead of taking a position of power in a corporate structure where you'd have the authority to affect company policy, you decide to become a huntress where, in all likelihood, you'll end up dying in a ditch somewhere.
My father was not the start of our name, and I refuse to let him be the end of it.
Wouldn't that involve getting pregnant and then taking a job as a board member of the Schnee Dust Company so you could get your father ejected from the company? I don't see how fighting monsters on the other side of the planet is going to further your goals. Sounds to me like the path she's on is just going to distance herself from the company so she can forget it ever existed. Like the tarnished family name is her sister's problem now. Or maybe she's just stupid and she actually thinks becoming a huntress will help.
I'm not stupid.
You're not one to back down from a challenge, Blake.
But I am. I do it all the time.
What?
I ran.
Well, running away like a bitch is the sole characteristic of the bad guy you twats all seem to be terrified of. What the fuck? After the Black trailer, the first thing we see her do is get all confrontational with Weiss, and then get all confrontational with Yang, and then she gets all confrontational with Weiss again, and then she does her best Roman Torchwick impression, and then she actively chooses to pursue the White Fang, and then she attacks Torchwick, and doesn't run away. Oh, and her defining characteristic for the first half of this volume was the frustration at the fact that the 4 of them were not doing their utmost to track down Torchwick right after the fight at the docks. Her dedication to the active pursuit of Torchwick even convinced the member of the cast whose semblance is stubbornness to meet her halfway.
I'm the only one who can do this! You're not one to back down from a challenge, Blake.
But I am. I do it all the time.
And then in the next episode, she puts her teammates and everyone else in Vale in grave danger in order to go after Torchwick all by herself.
At least you two have something that drives you.
Yes, flagrant contradiction of their established motivations, but go on.
I want a life where I won't know what tomorrow will bring.
But don't you... Oh, why do I even care?
To this day, I still want to know what happened to my mother and why she left me.
Yeah, I know. It really does seem like you would want a job that would take you all around the world so you'd have a better chance of finding out clues about your missing mom. But nah, you just want to not know what tomorrow will bring. What about RWBY?
Ever since she was a kid, she dreamt about being the heroes in the books.
As a girl, I wanted to be just like those heroes in the books.
Hey, that actually fits with her established characterization. Whoa, was that a mistake? So if you've been playing the drinking game, this is the first line you don't have to drink for. Also, if you've been playing the drinking game, you should probably call an ambulance. Then the dog has to pee.
You literally could have done that anywhere.
Really, RWBY, he was sleeping right on your bedroll. That wouldn't have ticked you off a little? Is RWBY implying that she would rather have had the dog pee in the room where everyone is sleeping? But there's no time to think about that now because the plot's happening. I guess to this volume's credit, significantly more happens in the way of plot development than last time around. But since absolutely nothing happened in the way of plot development last time around, I guess that's a fucking given. So in the first episode we get to see that Torchwick has finally succeeded in the thing that he repeatedly failed at during Volume 1. Off screen, of course, which raises the contrived-ass question of what exactly huntsmen do after graduation. Then Team RWBY goes out looking for information and they actually find some. And instead of giving that information to the proper authorities, or Ozpin, they wait until Glinda makes one of the dumbest connections in bad screenwriting history to tip off the adults. And then a clerical error and an executive decision lead to a bunch of unbriefed freshmen taking down a crime syndicate, which they only discovered because a dog who showed up only minutes before they left for the mission had to pee at an advantageous moment. And then as the cherry on top of that bullshit sundae, the ground literally opens up under the protagonist's feet and she falls face first into the plot. Oh, she landed face up. Coincidence is the most dangerous thing a writer can learn how to use. Except for the copy and paste function. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility, and the ability to force something almost impossible to happen in order to advance the plot apropos of nothing is infinite power and must be used responsibly. Like Cuervo, seriously, if you're still playing that drinking game, get help. So now I have to complain about common sense.
It's also a customizable, high-impact sniper rifle.
If RWBY is able to fire a high-impact sniper rifle from the hip and compensate for the recoil, this guy should have ended up like this. Has RWBY never been hit before? She shook that off in like a second. She didn't even react to that. I guess when something makes physical contact with her, it takes her a little longer to get over, which makes me wonder why anyone fights with dust. But that's not the really important part. The Crescent Rose never cuts anything, except Beowulf's, but they're made out of Marmite.
Yeah, we don't really cut things around
stuff.
here, we just push it.
But that means whenever she hits someone with it and they go flying through the air, that's her own upper body strength she's using.
RWBY ain't all that when she doesn't have her weapon.
Well, if you expect us to believe that, then you actually need to show the scythe being an effective part of her fighting style. Her speed comes from her semblance, and she only ever uses the scythe to scoop human enemies up off the ground. This is where your misguided attempts at making a family-friendly show backfire on you. If your bad guys never lose limbs, RWBY is effectively fighting with a ladle.
Soup's on.
But she's mostly using her power generated by her speed.
RWBY ain't all that when she doesn't have her weapon.
Yeah, that was one of the very first things, right?
Yeah, it was one of the rules that that we set up for her back before we wrote Volume 1.
Really? That's weird, because the very first action she performs in the series is to beat the crap out of this guy without using her scythe. Unless you expect me to believe she put it away immediately. And then she knocks this guy through a window and her scythe is nowhere to be seen. So how are those rules working out for you? Anyway, listen to how surprised Miles is about something that was written into a script that he's the lead writer of.
At the dance, it's the whole thing is that she can't or won't go after Cinder until she can get the scythe.
Her weapon.
So basically there's no reason for her to be throwing such wimpy punches. If the plot's not developing by way of coincidence, it's developing by way of contradiction and contrivance.
It's a little girl?
Then we get to the last good scene and it's all exposition. By spending 90 seconds talking about Mountain Glen, they give us an actual reason to care about the setting. Lines like this.
It worked for a short period of time, thanks to aggressive perimeter defense and unique transportation.
Humanize the ruins and make them feel like a setting instead of just a level. You might think that delivering this information in an exposition dump is less effective than the way they delivered the same information in this scene.
I see lives that could have been saved.
But Oobleck has already been established to have a boner for history.
Our history is the backbone of our very society, and the liver, and probably the kidneys if I were to wager.
So it's actually in character for him to speak normally as if he were delivering a lecture. The first line of this dump is very effective.
An expansion of Vale that was inevitably destroyed by creatures of Grimm.
By adding the word inevitably to that sentence, it means that in hindsight, the deaths of everyone in Mountain Glen would have been entirely preventable if smarter people had been in charge of the operation.
As a teacher, I'm able to take knowledge and place it into the hands of every student that passes through my classroom.
Striking you right in the feels. I mean the pathos. Saying the destruction was inevitable before the first line referencing the people who had died tells you a little about Oobleck's nature. He felt that the fact that their deaths were preventable was more important than the lives that were lost. These lines about the history of the tunnels sidestep stupid questions like how did they get there?
Working people commuting to the city, the main city, developed a subway system to the inner city.
Or why didn't they check there first?
An explosion opened the mouth of another cavern, filled with subterranean Grimm.
If those tunnels had been sacred ground, or filled with Grimm for an indeterminate amount of time, they might have fallen into the back of people's minds, thinking of them more as the graveyard under the city instead of the tunnels where people live. And frankly, the phrase,
creating the world's largest tomb,
is just flat out ominous and adds a lot of weight to this statement.
If Ruby is down there, we must find her.
Do you see how important delivering exposition is? This is an entertaining scene, and it's informative and relevant to the story.
We're not just looking for an underground crime network. We're looking for an underground crime network!
This is what storytelling is. Delivering exposition. So every time you say to yourself,
just enough exposition,
slap yourself in the face for being so wrong. So now prepare yourself for an episode worse than episode 8 of Volume 1. Yeah, they actually did the impossible. They fucked up harder than they did themselves last year. So the last thing Torchwick said the last time we saw him was,
"That would be bad."
But here he is toying with her like a retard. Why isn't he murdering her to death? He already knows that her presence is a bad thing because she or her friends foiled his plans the last 3 times.
That would be bad.
So why isn't she swinging from a rope?
You know, Perry, I really did need this.
Did none of these guys wonder where she came from? Or, I don't know, look up? Why doesn't Torchwick assume that her friends aren't far behind and put the base on high alert?
How'd you find this place, Red?
Again, did his henchmen not look up when they found her? They obviously heard the ceiling crashing down. That's what alerted them to her presence in the first place.
Where does she come from?
Look up! Why didn't they just look fucking up? They could have led with, she fell through a big hole in the ceiling of our hideout. So then this. Why doesn't he tie her up right now? Or fucking kill her? He can gain nothing by leaving her alive. How she found the hideout is irrelevant. She did find it, and Torchwick should be able to assume that at least the friends of hers that she was with last time, who he fucking knows know about the hideout, could be with her.
He sees us.
And then an explosion doesn't even tip him off.
We're not through here yet.
And then a second explosion doesn't tip him off.
What is going on here?
It's probably just some people looking for the good guy, who you already realize probably meant bad news for you.
That would be bad.
So why is she still alive? Why haven't you at least tied her up? Because she might do exactly that. But it's not like that's a problem, because you can just—
somebody kill her!
Oh, so why didn't you just kill her a full minute ago? Why don't you just use your hookshot again? What's wrong with it? Is it on cooldown or something? Bad guy aim.
Attach this car and spread the word. We're starting the train.
So now let's look at Torchwick's plan, and how it makes him out to be much more retarded than that last scene just did. And from the outside looking in, the plan doesn't actually look all that bad. Put bombs on the train cars to blow holes in the Grimm-infested city streets. The Grimm chase the train crashes into the barrier to open a hole for the Grimm to invade the city. I give the plan itself a 9 out of 10. I still have no idea what they set out to accomplish by enacting this plan.
That's still days away!
Or why the timeline of a couple days makes much of a difference, because the audience is never enlightened as to what exactly the villains of this fucking show are trying to do. I mean, if they have a timeline, they clearly can't be there to create general havoc. Was Torchwick supposed to run a distraction op for Cinder? Because I thought Cinder was the master of cleavage-related stealth tactics, so why does she need a distraction? She doesn't even seem to give a single fuck about security guards, huntresses, or main characters. A distraction of that scale doesn't seem like the kind of thing that can be reorganized within a couple of days, so is their whole plan a bust before the audience even finds out what it is or why it's important? Or are they gonna try to organize another city-rupturing distraction plan before the timeline is up? Or are they just gonna skip another semester worth of time between volumes 2 and 3? Look, every scene exists to communicate information to the audience, so the only reason to show us that Torchwick stole all that dust or that Cinder infiltrated the tower is to let the audience know that they're capable of that level of operation. If they had to work together, it would be reasonable to infer that the job was too hard for either of them to accomplish on their own. So showing us that an operation that is beyond anything either of them are capable of doing on their own got disrupted would either mean that the operation failed or that the elaborate setup was unnecessary. And considering that the elaborate setup was the only arc the audience was given to engage with means that the entire plot up to this point was either a red herring for something that hasn't been referenced yet or resulted in pre-pilot status quo. I mean, they could just start the entire story at Volume 3 and no one would notice. 3 out of the 4 main characters were written inconsistently between the first 2 volumes, so we still need clarification on which version of these characters we're supposed to be paying attention to. This guy from the Black trailer showing up out of nowhere will be just as relevant as him showing up out of the exact same nowhere when he makes his first appearance in Volume 3, and we still know nothing about Cinder besides her bust size. Torchwick should have just been arrested in the first episode. Anyway, back to the plan. Train, explosion, Grimm, crash, fine. But this train is filled to the brim with White Fang recruits, and guns, and mechs.
Then grab some cargo and get them off the train!
So if the plan was to explode or crash every compartment of this train, the only reason to fill it with soldiers and supplies is if you were expecting resistance. I mean, Torchwick is retarded, but he wouldn't put these guys and guns and mechs on the suicide train for no reason, would he? Probably. But having anything other than literal shit for brains would dictate that you don't put armed soldiers on a suicide train unless you're expecting resistance. So upon seeing the resistance that he expected with enough forethought to actually plan for, it doesn't seem to click for him that he should act upon it. So you kill the girl and send everyone to where she was found with the orders to execute everyone not wearing a Grimm mask. But whatever, Torchwick is a Tardwick. I mean, if he wasn't severely mentally handicapped, why would he be on the train that he had his guys rig with explosives? More importantly, why would he be in the front compartment of the train, which he knows full well is going to crash into the barrier between the subway tunnels and the city? Gosh, it would sure be inconvenient if you got knocked out in that first car and left there to die.
Hey, watch the hat!
So all that didn't even result in him losing his hat. This motherfucker's claim to fame is the ability to evade capture, and yet an entire invaded city full of Grimm didn't provide enough cover for him to slip away undetected. So was he sold out by these guys for blowing the timeline? Was getting arrested part of the plan? If so, why did they even need the train full of bombs?
Who's really behind all of this?
You're looking at him.
I mean, Torchwick taking the fall like this would imply that him getting arrested was part of the plan, so what was their fucking plan? So RWBY and her band of merry men come up with the bright idea of stopping the fucking train.
We're stopping that train. What about us?
We're going to stop this train.
Yeah, I know. I said that earlier.
Well then why the fuck did you just ask? So off the top of my head, I can think of about 1,000,000 ways to
stop this train!
First and foremost, Weiss could make an ice ramp on one of the tracks to derail it before it even passes them. After they discover that there are bombs in the back compartments, Weiss could just freeze these joints together and have the explosions derail the train. Blake could yell at all these Faunus recruits that this train is going to explode and they'll all die if they're on it.
Dude, that guy's dead!
And so is this guy. Oddly enough, Weiss is the only one who doesn't directly murder a Faunus in this scene. I mean, Blake knows that these are all just kids that have been pulled off the streets and unwittingly signed up for a suicide mission. Well, some of them, I guess. At least these 2 guys who rigged the train with bombs know better, but most of them are unaware that they're on a one-way trip to the morgue. Right?
Go below and try and stop those bombs!
Now, after watching this scene with subtitles on, I know that Ooblik is saying stop those bombs, but just listen to the line.
Go below and try and stop those bombs!
Doesn't it sound like he's saying hordes?
Those bombs!
Anyway, I listened to that line like 100 times on loop and never once heard the word bombs.
Those bombs!
Even after I knew that's what he was supposed to be saying.
Bombs!
Either way, the thing that Blake and the other one end up doing doesn't help stop the bombs either, because none of the compartments they enter ever explode. And why didn't they prioritize getting to the front car to stop the train instead of sending these 3 down below to accomplish absolutely nothing? And if you think about it, it really doesn't matter how many Grimm are in the subway tunnels if the exit stays sealed off. I mean, their goal is to stop the train, and splitting up is just about the only thing short of taking a nap that won't help them accomplish that. Then Ooblik drinks some lighter fluid and proves that he played Final Fantasy VIII. So how does Weiss survive either side of this impact plus being on fire? I mean, does a dog really have more aura than this guy? I mean, where are all the Corgi Faunuses? They seem really valuable if they can be used as anti-mech projectiles. Weiss gives Blake a thing, and where was she keeping that? And why was she holding on to it until now?
I'm afraid those bags won't be necessary, girls!
So out of all of the crap she decided to carry this thing, why not just give it to Blake before they left? Why right now? Where did she get it? Seriously, is that designed my own weapon plot hole from episode 2 ever going to go away? Did Blake hand over the schematics for her weapon to Weiss so she could make this thing? Does Blake use an off-the-shelf weapon because she didn't go to a combat school?
Most applicants spend years training at one of the many combat schools around the world. You did not.
How does she instantly learn how to use it? And it's at this point that we all have to sit down and remember that RWBY only exists so that we can watch Monty Oum do his thing. And maybe if there was ever a time to stop thinking about how bad the writing is, this would be it. Stop thinking about how reckless it was for these three to split off from the group. Stop thinking about how stupid it is for Yang to say,
"You two go on ahead. This one's mine."
And stop thinking about how the other two should have said something like, "Wouldn't it be safer or easier if Weiss just froze her legs in ice and we all moved on as a group? Because it's sort of pointless to fight her when we have a job to do." Or, "Hey, remember the last time you fought her, you couldn't lay a finger on her? So do you think this fight might have a similar outcome? Maybe you could use the help of someone who is also adept at the art of dodging attacks, or someone who has the ability to reduce the mobility of her enemies using ice." And stop thinking about how oddly personal that line was, despite these two only having 20 seconds of experience with each other. We're not supposed to think about any of that at all. And maybe we're not supposed to think about what the outcome would have been if Blake didn't parry this attack right here. Or we're not supposed to think about how it might be dangerous for Blake to run on ahead alone. Just so long as we're clear that we are not supposed to be thinking about any of that stuff, I do like how Neo as a character is sort of the kryptonite to Yang's Goku. Wait, what?
She has like a counter to everything Yang does.
Well, Neo dodges all the time and uses Aikido-style martial arts to use Yang's own force against her. And Yang really just wants to tank blows so she can hit harder. Neo is like the anti-Yang in a lot of ways, which means it's a good thing that Yang has teammates that she can count on and oh, they just abandoned her. Just like her mom did. Burn! This guy has a pretty amazing line.
Finally, I get to kill a Schnee.
Hold on, what happened to your sweet accent?
Thank you all for coming.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, fuck the Schnees. Even though Weiss's racism has been swept under the rug this whole volume, I always knew the Schnees were racist motherfuckers. Those slave-owning pricks don't deserve to have their opponents follow the rules of slow-motion fighting. I mean, seriously, that's hilarious. Weiss is going in for the slow-motion kill shot, and this guy says, "Nope, regular speed." And then he knocks her out by slamming her face into the floor. The ground is so OP. Wait.
Eat ceiling, then eat floor. Style?
Oh, that is fucking bullshit. But this raises a whole bunch of questions about how aura works. Also about how French doors work. I mean, we've already established that these doors slide open, so how did he hit her through it? I mean, aura. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Why can't aura stop you from getting knocked out, but it can passively protect you from getting sliced in half, even if you're fucking asleep? Why does anyone use a bladed weapon? I mean, I already knew that Nora was the smartest character in this show, but seriously, blades are completely worthless. Like, even Pure uses the floor.
It can protect a combatant from what would normally be a fatal blow.
But not a KO. And then what's up with this? Foot out like a light. Slice. Walk it off. No, Neo, didn't you hear what I just said about blades being useless? That's not gonna do anything. And now, if you'll excuse me, I feel the need to make a pervy comment about this clipping issue. So Yang, I see the carpet matches the drapes. Hold on, wait, are we even allowed to show that? Let's throw up some pixelation. And then totally not Yang's mom, I swear, shows up to save the day. I mean, that's not her real name, but it should be. In the credits, she's listed as Raven Branwyn, which translates to Raven, Blessed White Raven. And then Torchwick and Blake finally face off once and for all. Mano y gato. And what does the culmination of all of Blake's fears and trepidations finally amount to? About 30 seconds of kicking his ass, followed by not killing him for a second time.
Finish him. Do it, Blake.
I thought this guy was the bane of your existence for the entire volume.
Torchwick, the White Fang, all of it.
I mean, I love the choreography for each one of these one-on-one fights, but the writing is so full of skull fuckery that it's hard to enjoy them. I truly envy all the people who can turn their brains off and just enjoy this shit. But I do not appreciate the people who turn their brains off while they write this shit.
I saw you at the rally. We're on the same side, and you know it.
Why do you expect that comment to sway her? She knows firsthand that you put everyone from that rally on a suicide mission.
Finish him. Do it, Blake.
So what's it gonna be, Blake?
He's mine!
You know, getting 3 cars away from the front of the train would have seemed a little more poignant if you actually gave it your all to get there. You know, if they put some effort in, worked together as a team to complete their goal. I mean, here's a scene of RWBY and Oobleck stopping to fight a mech. That could have been Blake, Weiss, and Yang, and RWBY and Oobleck could have sped ahead. That would have saved them at least 3 cars worth of travel time. I mean, their goal was...
Stop this train!
So all they really needed to do was clear a path so the girl with the speed semblance could get to the front car and slam the brakes. But instead they split up for a reason that wasn't even narratively relevant.
I needed boss fights.
And when they reunite, they all share meaningful smiles and commit seppuku before dooming everyone in Vale to the fate of getting eaten alive by Grimm. The end. Oh wait, there's another episode of this, isn't there? Jean pulls rank like an asshole.
We're changing our mission. Everyone on board. Hey, an Ark never goes back on his word.
Although, it's not actually impressive to have seen that coming, because if you'll remember correctly...
Run and live! Man, we gotta get over there! Ren, we'll make it out to that village another time.
Well, you still have 6 days before the mission starts, jackass. Where did these Nevermores come from? There weren't any in the tunnels. Did they fly over the walls? How? Why now? If Nevermores can fly over the walls and into the city anytime they please, why aren't there always Nevermores in the city? Or why isn't there some sort of defense against them?
Totally fine. Done this before.
Jean seriously hasn't figured out that Pyrrha saved him from the Ursa the first time around? Didn't I make some comment in my first video about how giving Jean false confidence like that would lead to him making some stupid, careless decision like this? Oh well, I guess it all worked out, so it doesn't matter. And then these guys show up. And keep your eye on this one, because she's about to ruin the whole series. And should I even do the math? Any point of conflict in the show that gets discussed further than let Coco handle it will be impossible to take seriously after witnessing a display like that.
So if we could just get 1 million Cocos just to surround every city, we'll be good.
And then there's this.
Hey, come on, you spent all semester building that up.
No, she really fucking hasn't. She's had 25 seconds of screen time this volume, in which she was not holding nor did she ever mention her weapon. In fact, her first line was,
I had Yatsuhashi to look out for me.
Which sure makes it sound like her weapon sucks ass, because if she had a half-decent one, she wouldn't need someone to look out for her.
Team Coffee's away mission lasted longer than expected.
So that means at least one of them is a weak link.
Your mission was supposed to end a week ago. What happened?
There were just so many.
And I doubt it's the one who's looking out for Velvet, or the girl who kills Grimm so easily it makes all the other characters in the series seem useless.
You just destroyed my favorite clothing store. Prepare to die.
Why? I don't even know. The only way it could possibly get worse from here is if they added a genocide scene. And if Torchwick survived that crash, some of those Faunus must still be alive, and now they're just trapped in there with the Grimm? My only hope is that Volume 3 starts with some sort of a search and rescue operation, 'cause that's just sick.
The kingdom officially sealed off the tunnels, creating the world's largest tomb.
I guess killing off a big chunk of the population is one way to deal with a civil rights issue. I mean, when you go out of your way to make a faction sympathetic, and I mean really sympathetic, with an understandable and relatable motivation.
So if anybody needs like a comparison for what the Faunus are in this world, it's like the way African American people were viewed.
Do you mean like 50s and 60s, like civil rights movement?
Yeah, stuff like that.
I actually want to see them succeed. Or at least I do. It hurts to see them used as a pawn in some operation we don't give a shit about and don't know anything about. We don't even know what huntsmen are supposed to do. We have yet to see a huntsman do anything besides teach, and no one is shown to be taking those classes seriously. I mean, do you expect us to believe they defend the city? There was a full-scale Grimm invasion and only 3 showed up. 2 of them were teachers and 1 of them was already there. There aren't even active-duty huntsmen stopping Nevermores from flying into the city. I know what the White Fang does, and I'd much rather see them fight for equality than watch these assholes kill them.
I'd call today a success.
Storytelling in its purest form is the art of delivering exposition. Your job is letting the audience know who, what, why, and to a lesser extent, where and when. The characters, their goals, their motivations, and the world. Every scene in a screenplay should pertain to one of those four aspects to some degree. If a scene happens and the audience isn't left with some insight into one of those four aspects, it was a bad scene. So Cinder is fucking pleased with herself, and we don't know why. This is it. We're here at the end, with nothing to show for it except Torchwick's arrest. And that was their doing. So I guess we're supposed to believe that was all part of the plan. With status quo being so aggressively maintained to the point where a full-on grim invasion gets put down before breakfast, is it physically possible to care about anything? Especially a plan we haven't heard word one about, carried out by someone whose motivations we don't know, carried out against people whose motivations are impossible to relate to.
But they'll listen to me.
I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel anymore. So let's roll back to a scene that I do know what I'm supposed to feel about. Annoyed.
We still don't even know why they did this.
You're aware that using up the denouement of your show to excuse yourself for not accomplishing anything is not good writing, right?
Not every story has a neat and tidy ending.
What did I tell you about excusing yourself for crappy writing in the show's canon? But that is true. Not every story has a neat and tidy ending. But most stories have beginnings and middles. Not just a slapdash string of words that eats up 2.5 hours of runtime. Team RWBY's arc has two conflicting first acts. Cinder's arc starts in Act 2 because she was never properly introduced, and the second act of Torchwick's arc happens completely off-screen and conflicts with everything that was established by his introduction. Torchwick spent the entire off-season breaking character by stealing dust uncharacteristically well in preparation for an attack which did not serve its intended purpose.
That's still days away!
So Torchwick's arc concluded without setting up solid characterization for him, and the audience never finding out what he was supposed to be doing in the first place. Now he's arrested, and the writing still can't decide whether he's a credible threat or a pathetic joke to be pummeled for our amusement. Blake seems oddly at ease with the fact that lots of Faunus are dead because of her team and Glinda.
A lot of Faunus didn't make it out of those tunnels.
Was that supposed to be Blake's arc?
I'd suggest training for the tournament, but I think we have that covered at this point.
At which point did you decide you were prepared for the tournament? Was it when your face hit the ground, or when you got baseballed through a French door by a chainsaw? Or was it when Yang lost a fight to a watermelon, or was it when she lost a fight to a midget? Was it when RWBY realized she had the upper body strength of a grasshopper, or when she realized she had a glass jaw? Or when she fell asleep in the middle of a high-speed chase? I mean, Blake seems prepared, but she needs to work on her self-confidence.
It's just good to see that they really are pretty novice at what they're doing, and they've just had to fight people that are kind of shit so far.
I personally think training should be your top priority.
I'm going to sleep forever.
Ozpin gets replaced with Ironwood.
The best option is to appoint General Ironwood as head of security for the event.
And the resounding reaction is either a grunt of contempt because you've grown complacent with the awful writing by now, or a head scratch and a, what? I think the meat of the issue is that the climax of the story is introduced at the moment it's resolved. We as the audience never knew that the position of head of security for the Vital Festival was a position that existed, and much less that it was held by Ozpin. Taking a station that we didn't know existed away from a character who we didn't know held it and giving it to a character that we know nothing about is not the climax of a story. This is just the bad writing version of simply introducing Ironwood as head of security for the Vital Festival in episode 2, because we still don't actually know why he came to Vale in the first place. I mean, if you use your head long enough to reach the conclusion that it's unnecessary to show up 5 months in advance for anything. So just by dumb luck, he showed up in Vale in the nick of time to be promoted to a position that would necessitate him being there. But even ignoring that, it doesn't make any sense to replace Ozpin because his students had a faster reaction time and did more to fight off the Grim than Ironwood's mechs. I would say it's because Ozpin's an alcoholic, but it's probably because he sent a bunch of freshmen to investigate the most important threat to Vale's security instead of sending some real huntsmen. Which is as good a reason as any to get fired from your job. But replacing him with Ironwood, besides the obvious reason of someone insecure enough to actually call himself Ironwood would overcompensate for everything in every way possible, but his internal security is garbage. Cinder struts all the way into the deepest level of your hold and there isn't even a secondary security response by the time RWBY gets there. Where are your fail-safes? You couldn't even defend your military production line because Cinder managed to steal a ton of them.
And thanks to my employer, we've managed to snag a few.
Based on that line, you could work under the assumption that Torchwick is working for Ironwood, and he's the employer who armed the operation in order to further himself politically in Vale. Ironwood shows up out of nowhere with his fleet. He tries to undermine Vale's security by marketing his own mechs, funds a terrorist attack, and even though he strongly disagrees with how Ozpin handles things with the White Fang situation, he never acts on it himself. Plus, he gets a massive windfall from this breach that his mechs facilitated. It was set up almost conclusively.
You brought this on yourself.
But then why this little exchange between him and Torchwick?
Who's really behind all of this?
Isn't it obvious? You're looking at him.
Maybe it's only a deal between Ironwood and Cinder, and he's just confirming that Torchwick doesn't know he was involved. But why keep a loose end alive if he was only ever supposed to serve as the distraction?
He could surprise us and be like a total good guy. Sure. Who just wants to protect everything, which is what he is portrayed as.
Or, you know, maybe I'm the dumb one for thinking something interesting could come of this.
We also watch a lot of animes where just nothing happens, and you're expected to, like, be invested in it. It could be written well, yes.
Oh, it could be, couldn't it? What a novel concept.